The sun hung low over Edgewood Park, painting the trees in golden light and casting long shadows across the jogging paths. The air carried the laughter of children from the playground and the rhythmic chirping of unseen birds. Olivia Carter sat on a bench near the park's pond, her black leather jacket folded neatly beside her. She took a deep breath, savoring the rare moment of tranquility. Her short-cropped hair framed her sharp features, and her dark eyes scanned the park with a casual vigilance. Olivia's years in the Marines had taught her the value of staying aware. Even when off duty, she stretched her legs, clad in simple jeans and sneakers, and let her thoughts drift. But her instincts wouldn't let her fully relax. Across the park, near a large oak tree, a group of men had been lingering for far too long. Olivia noted the way they stood, tense and deliberate, their conversation peppered with sharp laughter. The leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and a scar running down his jawline, leaned against the tree like he owned the place. His name was Marcus Red Booker. Olivia had seen men like him before, bullies with too much confidence and too little purpose. The other three were no better. A wiry man with patchy facial hair, whom Marcus referred to as Pete, hung close, cracking his knuckles as if preparing for a fight. The remaining two were younger, probably in their early 20s, with a cocky swagger that came from being in Marcus's shadow. Olivia shifted slightly, her boots crunching against the gravel. She'd been sitting here for a while, long enough to see the group's gaze flick her way more than once. Their intentions were clear. They saw her as an easy target, a lone woman, minding her business. But Olivia was anything but vulnerable. The men began to move, their laughter louder now as they walked toward her. Olivia's spine straightened, her demeanor calm, but every fiber of her being prepared for what was to come. "Afternoon, Mom," Marcus greeted as they reached her bench. His tone was dripping with mock politeness. "Nice day for sitting out here alone, don't you think?" Olivia's eyes met his with unwavering composure. "It is. What do you want?" Marcus chuckled, turning back to his crew as if Olivia had told a joke. "What do we want, boys? Maybe just a little chat. You seem like the friendly type." Pete stepped closer, his grin revealing yellowed teeth. "Yeah. Or maybe she's the type who thinks she's too good to talk to the likes of us." Olivia's gaze flicked between the four of them. She noted their stances, their proximity, and the best routes for escape if things escalated. Despite her calm exterior, her mind calculated every possible outcome. The odds weren't ideal, but she'd faced worse. "You should keep walking," Olivia said evenly. "I'm not in the mood for whatever game this is." Marcus's grin faded, replaced by a sneer. "Game? No game, lady. We just figured you could share some of that big city money. That bag of yours looks like it's worth something." He nodded toward her small leather backpack on the bench beside her. Olivia's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but enough to make Marcus pause. "You think this is going to go the way you planned?" she asked quietly. Marcus stepped closer, his towering frame attempting to intimidate. "Oh, I know it will," he growled. "Hand over the bag, or we're going to have a problem." Olivia stood, her movements deliberate. Though Marcus was taller, her presence seemed to fill the space between them. "You're already having a problem," she said, her voice steady. "Walk away." For a moment, the group hesitated. Pete shifted uncomfortably, and one of the younger men glanced around, noticing for the first time that a few people in the park were watching from a distance. But Marcus wasn't about to back down. His pride wouldn't allow it. "You've got guts," Marcus said, stepping forward, his tone darker now. "But guts don't mean much when you're outnumbered." Olivia didn't reply. She stood her ground, her stance balanced and ready. Pete lunged first, his movements sloppy and uncoordinated. Olivia sidestepped with ease, grabbing his arm and twisting it sharply. Pete let out a yelp of pain as he hit the ground. Clutching his wrist, the younger men moved next. Emboldened by Marcus's barked orders, one swung at her with wild energy, but Olivia blocked it cleanly, countering with a quick elbow strike that sent him stumbling. The other tried to grab her from behind, but she ducked, using his momentum to flip him over her shoulder. Marcus snarled, charging at her like a bull. His fists swung in wide arcs. More force than precision. Olivia dodged the first punch and countered with a kick to his knee. He staggered but didn't fall, his rage boiling over. "You're gonna regret this," he spat, rushing at her again. Olivia knew she had to end this quickly. She sidestepped his charge and delivered a sharp strike to his ribs, forcing the air from his lungs. Marcus dropped to one knee, gasping for breath. The other three were sprawled on the ground, groaning in defeat. Before Marcus could recover, the faint wail of approaching sirens broke the tense silence. Someone must have called the police. The gang exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier bravado crumbling. "This isn't over," Marcus growled, clutching his side as he stood. "You don't know who you're messing with." Olivia's voice was cold and steady. "Neither do you." As the police cars pulled up, the gang scattered, disappearing into the trees. Olivia didn't chase them, she simply picked up her jacket and bag, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She knew this wasn't the end. Marcus and his crew would regroup, and when they did, she would be ready. The lights of the city twinkled in the distance as Olivia Carter sat in her modest apartment, a cup of coffee warming her hands. The events at Edgewood Park replayed in her mind, each detail etched sharply into her memory. She had expected Marcus Booker and his gang to cause trouble, but their audacity went deeper than she anticipated. This wasn't just a random act of aggression, it felt calculated. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, a message from Sam Jefferson, an old friend and local journalist. "Heard about Edgewood. You okay? We need to talk." Olivia sighed. Sam had a knack for uncovering stories others missed, and if she was reaching out, it meant this wasn't an isolated incident. She replied quickly, setting up a meeting for the next morning. The night was restless. Olivia's instincts wouldn't let her fully relax. Marcus's parting words lingered. "You don't know who you're messing with." She had dealt with bullies before, but Marcus's certainty hinted at something larger. She resolved to dig deeper, not just for her safety but for anyone else who might cross their path. The next day, Olivia met Sam at a diner on the edge of town. The place was quiet, the kind of spot where people didn't ask questions. Sam, a wiry woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, slid a folder across the table as Olivia sat down. "Glad you're okay," Sam said, her voice low, "but I think you've stepped into something big." Olivia flipped open the folder, scanning the contents. Photos of Marcus and his crew, grainy but unmistakable, filled the pages. There were also reports of incidents around town, vandalism, intimidation, and physical assaults. The victims were predominantly people of color or those seen as outsiders by the local community. "They've been at this for months," Sam explained. "And Marcus? He's not just some thug. He's tied to a group that's been stirring up trouble in small towns across the state." Olivia's jaw tightened as she read. "What kind of group?" "The kind that hides behind a veil of patriotism," Sam said bitterly. "They call themselves the Sovereign Sons. On the surface, they're just a community organization. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find connections to hate groups, funding for extremist activities, and a network of enforcers like Marcus." Olivia leaned back, processing the information. "And the police?" Sam scoffed. "Some of them are trying, but it's hard to get anything to stick. The Sovereign Sons are careful. They keep their operations decentralized, and their leaders stay clean. Marcus is small time compared to the ones pulling the strings. Olivia closed the folder, her expression grim. Then we need to cut through their network. Sam hesitated. Liv, these people are dangerous. They don't just threaten, they follow through. You've already put a target on your back by standing up to Marcus. Olivia met Sam's gaze, her voice steady. I've faced worse. If they think they can scare me into silence, they're wrong. Sam nodded, though the worry in her eyes remained. All right, if you're in, I'll help, but we need to be smart about this. The Sovereign Sons aren't just a local problem, they've got resources, connections, and power. If we're going to take them on, we need evidence. That evening, Olivia found herself in the neighborhood Marcus frequented. She had followed Pete, Marcus's wiry right-hand man, from a distance, watching as he slipped into a seedy bar on the outskirts of town. The place was dimly lit, with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that read Billy's Tavern. She waited for a moment, her hood pulled low, before stepping inside. The stench of stale beer and cigarettes hit her immediately. Her eyes adjusted quickly, scanning the room for Pete. He was seated at a corner table, hunched over with a drink in hand, talking animatedly to another man Olivia didn't recognize. Keeping her distance, Olivia slid into a booth nearby, her back to the wall and her ears straining to catch snippets of their conversation. The hum of the bar made it difficult to hear, but one word stood out: shipment. Boss says we need to move it quick, Pete muttered, his voice low but urgent. The heat's on after that stunt at the park. The other man grunted. Where's it going? Pete leaned in closer, his voice almost a whisper. Warehouse on Birch Street, midnight tomorrow. Don't screw it up. Olivia's pulse quickened. Whatever they were moving, it was important enough to make Pete nervous. She slipped out of the bar unnoticed, her mind racing. Birch Street was in the industrial district, a maze of abandoned buildings and shady operations. If she could intercept the shipment, she might uncover the next piece of the Sovereign Sons network. The next night, Olivia crouched behind a stack of rusted shipping containers near the warehouse. The faint glow of a single overhead light illuminated the building's entrance, where two men stood guard. They were armed, their postures tense. From her vantage point, Olivia could see a van backed up to the loading dock. Pete was there, barking orders at a few others as they unloaded crates. She strained her eyes, trying to make out the markings on the boxes. They were plain, nondescript, but Olivia's gut told her they contained something valuable, or dangerous. She waited, her patience a skill honed from years in the military. Finally, the guards stepped away for a cigarette, and Pete disappeared inside the warehouse. Olivia moved swiftly, her steps silent as she approached the van. She peeked inside, her heart sinking as she confirmed her suspicions. The crates were filled with weapons, pistols, rifles, and boxes of ammunition. Before she could retreat, a voice barked from behind her. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Olivia turned slowly, her hands raised. One of the guards had spotted her, his gun drawn. Pete emerged from the warehouse moments later, his face twisting into a sneer when he recognized her. Well, Pete said, pulling out a knife. Look who decided to pay us a visit. You've got guts, lady, I'll give you that. Olivia's eyes flicked between the two men, her mind calculating her next move. She had been outnumbered before, and she knew she had one advantage they didn't: training. Big mistake coming here, Pete continued, stepping closer. Marcus is gonna love hearing about this. Olivia's lips twitched into a faint smile. You think Marcus scares me? Pete's expression darkened, and he lunged. Olivia moved like lightning, sidestepping his attack and twisting his arm behind him. He cried out, dropping the knife. The guard hesitated, unsure whether to fire or retreat. Olivia used Pete as a shield, forcing the guard to lower his weapon. "Now," Olivia said coldly, her grip on Pete unyielding. "You're going to tell me everything I want to know." Pete squirmed in Olivia's grip, his face twisted with pain and frustration. The guard standing a few feet away hesitated, unsure whether to take a shot or wait for backup. Olivia's calm but unyielding voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Drop the gun," she ordered, her grip tightening on Pete's arm, "or your friend here gets hurt worse than he already is." The guard wavered, his hand trembling slightly as his eyes darted between Pete and Olivia. Finally, he lowered the weapon and set it on the ground, raising his hands in surrender. "Smart move," Olivia said. She shoved Pete forward, sending him sprawling onto the pavement, and quickly kicked the guard's gun out of reach. Both men stared at her, a mix of anger and fear flickering across their faces. "Now," she continued, her tone sharp, "you're going to tell me what's in those crates and where they're going." Pete glared up at her from the ground, clutching his shoulder. "Like hell I will." Olivia knelt beside him, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think Marcus will protect you after this? He's not here, and if you don't start talking, I'll make sure the police have enough evidence to put you away for decades." "Your choice." Pete's bravado faltered, his eyes darting toward the warehouse. The guard remained silent, his expression tight with worry. Olivia could see the cracks forming in Pete's tough exterior, the weight of his situation pressing down on him. "All right," Pete muttered, his voice low. "The crates, they're weapons. Marcus said they're part of a bigger shipment, going to some guys outside the city. That's all I know." Olivia frowned. "Who are these guys? What are they planning?" "I don't know," Pete snapped. "I swear, Marcus keeps most of the details to himself. He just told us to load the crates and make sure they get to the warehouse on Halstead Avenue tomorrow night." Olivia's mind raced. Halstead Avenue was known for its abandoned factories and sparse police presence. It was the perfect place for illegal activity to go unnoticed. She grabbed Pete by the collar, her tone icy. "If I find out you're lying, I'll make sure you don't see daylight for a long time." Pete nodded quickly, his fear evident. Olivia released him and stood, her eyes scanning the area. The van was still partially loaded, and the sounds of movement inside the warehouse suggested that more men were nearby. It was time to go. She stepped back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as she had appeared. Pete and the guard exchanged nervous glances, neither daring to follow her. The next morning, Olivia sat in a small cafe with Sam, the tension from the previous night still weighing heavily on her. She relayed everything Pete had told her, watching as Sam's brow furrowed with concern. "This isn't just about weapons," Sam said, tapping her pen against her notebook. "If they're moving this many guns, it's for something big. We need to figure out who's on the other end of this deal." Olivia nodded. "I'm going to Halstead tonight. If Marcus or his buyers are there, I'll make sure they don't leave with those crates." Sam's expression darkened. "Liv, this is getting dangerous. You're one person going up against an entire network. You need backup." "I have you," Olivia said with a faint smile. "And I have a plan." Sam shook her head, clearly unconvinced but knowing there was no stopping her friend. "Just be careful, okay? If things go south, you need to get out of there." Olivia's smile faded. "I will, but I'm not letting them get away with this." That night, Olivia found herself crouched in the shadows near the abandoned factory on Halstead Avenue. The faint hum of distant traffic was the only sound as she surveyed the scene. A large truck was parked outside the factory, its engine idling as men moved crates from the warehouse to the vehicle. Marcus stood near the loading dock, his imposing figure silhouetted against the dim light. Olivia noted the increased security, 4 armed guards patrolling the perimeter, each one alert and watching for trouble. This wasn't just a simple handoff. Whatever was happening here, it was critical to the Sovereign Son's operation. She waited patiently, her eyes scanning for weaknesses. The guards' movements were predictable, their paths overlapping in a way that left small windows of opportunity. When one of them disappeared around the corner, Olivia moved silently toward the loading dock, her footsteps muffled by the soft dirt. As she reached the side of the building, she heard Marcus's voice, sharp and commanding. "We need this shipment out of here in 20 minutes. He barked. "The buyers aren't waiting, and I don't want any screw-ups." Olivia peeked around the corner, her eyes narrowing as she spotted two men standing near Marcus. They were dressed sharply, their suits a stark contrast to the rough appearances of Marcus and his crew. These were the buyers, clearly professionals with money to spend. Her gut told her they weren't local. They moved with an air of authority, their conversation with Marcus calm but firm. One of them handed Marcus a briefcase, which he opened to reveal stacks of cash. "This is the last payment," one of the buyers said, his voice carrying a faint accent. "We expect everything to be in order." "It's all there," Marcus replied. "Guns, ammo, the works. You won't be disappointed." Olivia's jaw tightened. She had seen enough. It was time to act. She moved quickly, slipping inside the factory through a side door. The interior was dimly lit, with crates stacked haphazardly along the walls. She found a vantage point on an elevated catwalk, her eyes scanning the floor below. From her perch, she could see Marcus overseeing the loading process, the buyers watching with satisfaction. Olivia reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, dialing a number she had memorized. "This is Carter," she whispered when the call connected. "I'm at Halstead. They're moving a major weapons shipment right now. I need backup." The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. "We're on our way. Hang tight." Olivia ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. She couldn't afford to wait for reinforcements. If the truck left before the police arrived, the trail would go cold. Her eyes locked onto a stack of barrels near the loading dock. She grabbed a small piece of debris and hurled it toward the barrels, sending them crashing to the ground with a deafening clang. The guards reacted instantly, their guns drawn as they moved toward the source of the noise. Marcus and the buyers turned, their expressions darkening as they barked orders. "What the hell was that?" Marcus growled. Olivia used the distraction to move closer, her eyes fixed on the briefcase of cash. If she could grab it, she'd have concrete evidence tying Marcus to the sale. As she approached the table, one of the buyers spotted her. "There's someone here," he shouted, drawing his weapon. Marcus turned, his face twisting with rage as he recognized her. "You again?" Before he could react, Olivia lunged for the briefcase, grabbing it and sprinting toward the exit. The buyers fired, bullets ricocheting off metal as she ducked behind a stack of crates. The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance, signaling the arrival of law enforcement. "Stop her," Marcus roared, his voice echoing through the factory. But Olivia was already gone, disappearing into the night with the briefcase in hand. She had what she needed to bring Marcus down. The precinct bustled with energy as Olivia Carter sat in a brightly lit conference room, the briefcase from the previous night resting on the table in front of her. Officers and investigators pored over its contents, stacks of cash, shipping manifests, and transaction records that painted a damning picture of Marcus Booker and his network. Officer Karen Holt, a seasoned detective with a sharp gaze, flipped through the documents with growing intensity. "This is solid," she said, her voice edged with both satisfaction and urgency. "It's not just the weapons deal. These records connect Marcus to at least 3 other shipments in neighboring cities. This isn't a gang, it's a pipeline." Olivia leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. "And the buyers?" Holt sighed, setting the papers down. "We're running their IDs now. based on their accents and the way they conducted themselves. I'm betting they're part of an international smuggling ring. Marcus is a middleman. But these guys, they're the top of the food chain. The room fell silent for a moment as the gravity of the situation settled over everyone. This wasn't just about Edgewood Park or even the Sovereign Sons. This was a sprawling network of criminal activity with Marcus as a key cog in the machine. "We've got him," Holt said finally, her tone resolute. "With this evidence, there's no way Marcus walks." Olivia's jaw tightened. "Good, but he's not the only one we're after. The Sovereign Sons are still operating, and they'll replace him if we don't cut the head off the snake." Holt nodded. "First, we make sure Marcus can't slip through the cracks. Then, we move up the chain." The interrogation room was stark and cold, its fluorescent lights buzzing faintly as Marcus sat slumped in a metal chair. His wrists were cuffed to the table, his once imposing frame now hunched in defiance. Across from him, Olivia and Holt watched him in silence. "You've got nothing," Marcus growled, his voice dripping with contempt. "That briefcase, you think it ties me to anything? It's just business." Holt leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "It's not just business when it funds illegal arms deals and domestic terrorism. You're looking at federal charges, Marcus. Decades in prison, if you're lucky." Marcus smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You think the Sons will let me rot in here? They take care of their own." Olivia's voice was cold and cutting. "They won't. You're a liability now. They'll cut ties with you the second it's convenient." Marcus's smirk faltered, just for a moment. Olivia pressed on. "We know about the shipments, the buyers, the pipeline, but you're not the top dog. You're just a pawn, Marcus. And pawns are expendable." Marcus's jaw tightened, his bravado cracking under the weight of her words. Holt slid a file across the table, flipping it open to reveal surveillance photos of Marcus with key members of the Sovereign Sons. "This is your chance to save yourself," Holt said. "Cooperate, and we'll consider a deal. Otherwise, you take the fall for everything." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the lights. Marcus's eyes flicked to the photos, then to Olivia, his expression a mixture of anger and resignation. "What do you want to know?" he muttered. Hours later, Olivia and Holt stood in the precinct's operations room, a map of the state pinned to the wall. Red strings connected key locations, warehouses, meeting spots, and distribution hubs, all tied to the Sovereign Sons. "Marcus gave us enough to start dismantling their network," Holt said, marking another location on the map. "But the real prize is their leader. They call him Patriot. He's the one running the show." Olivia crossed her arms, her eyes fixed on the map. "Did Marcus give us anything on him?" Holt nodded. "He mentioned a compound outside the city, remote, heavily guarded. Patriot holds meetings there with his top lieutenants. If we can get inside, we can take down the entire operation." "It's a trap," Olivia said flatly. "Patriot will be expecting us." Holt's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's why we're bringing backup." 2 nights later, Olivia found herself in the back of an unmarked van, the hum of the engine the only sound as the team approached the compound. The air was thick with tension, every officer silently preparing for the confrontation ahead. Holt sat beside her, her expression grim. "We move fast and hit hard. The objective is to secure the compound and capture Patriot alive." Olivia nodded, checking her gear one last time. "Let's end this." The van came to a stop a mile from the compound. The team moved swiftly and silently through the dense woods, the faint glow of the compound's floodlights guiding their path. Olivia's heart pounded, her instincts on high alert as they neared the perimeter. Through her night vision goggles, she could see armed guards patrolling the compound's fence. Holt raised a hand, signaling the team to spread out. Within minutes, The guards were subdued, their radios silenced before they could call for help. The team breached the compound, their movements coordinated and precise. Inside, chaos erupted as the Sovereign Sons scrambled to defend their stronghold. Olivia moved with practiced efficiency, disarming and incapacitating anyone who stood in her way. In the main hall, she found him, Patriot, a tall, imposing figure with a sharp suit and a calm demeanor. He stood at the head of a long table surrounded by his lieutenants. His eyes narrowed as he spotted Olivia. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "You think taking me down will change anything?" Olivia stepped forward, her gun trained on him. "It's a start." Patriot smirked. "You have no idea how deep this goes." Before he could say more, Holt and the rest of the team stormed the room, their weapons raised. Patriot's lieutenants surrendered quickly, their confidence crumbling under the weight of the raid. Patriot remained calm as he was cuffed, his smirk never fading. "You've won this battle," he said as they led him away. "But the war is far from over." Back at the precinct, Olivia watched as the evidence from the compound was catalogued. Patriot's files contained everything they needed to dismantle the Sovereign Sons: names, locations, financial records, and communications. Holt approached, her expression weary but satisfied. "It's over. We've got enough to shut him down for good." Olivia nodded, though the weight of the fight still lingered. "For now." Holt placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, Carter. This wouldn't have happened without you." As the sun rose over the city, Olivia stepped outside, the cool morning air washing over her. The Sovereign Sons were finished. But she knew the fight against hate and corruption was never truly over. For now, though, justice had been served, and that was enough.